So hey, I had a chance to check out what's it called? The Tent.
Yes. Yes.
Is that out today?
Yeah, yeah. That it's actually been out for a little bit. But yeah, we kind of had a rolling release type situation, so that was slowly being released on all the platforms over the course of June and early July.
Wow, you must be proud that it's finally released everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a long time coming. We shot in like 17, late 17, and so we've been editing and putting things together, and it's just been just getting it finished up until probably late last year. So yes, it is very much making a movie is not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure, and it's been a ride, no doubt.
So I was fascinating, and that's because you had this out of this world twist towards the end of the movie. But I want to know, where did the original idea came from for the tent?
Yeah, no, the original idea for the tent kind of came from two different places. It came for the initial idea came from I just one night I had a nightmare. It was super vivid, and I was like jumping from tent to tent, escaping these creatures, and so I remember just waking up and having like this kind of visual in my head of, you know, like, man, that was so vivid and weird, and it just stuck with me for the rest of the week because it was really just kind of haunting. um, and of course, you know, it's impossible for me to like put you in that nightmare, but it was I remember just talking to my wife about it and being like, I can't get this out of my head, and maybe this would be kind of a cool movie. And then as we, you know, as I started kind of digging into it and like, okay, well, what would the story be and what would it look like? um, I just kind of I had like these somewhat unresolved, you know, feelings from my childhood in regards to, you know, my father, and just kind of watching him go through some of the issues he went through. And then I was like, it just like one day just clicked, boom. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we need to tell his story utilizing this abstract kind of medium. Um, and you know, I've been making movies for a while, so I was like, it's gonna be a movie. It has to be a movie. It can't be anything else. So that was really kind of, it started with a nightmare and kind of culminated in like wanting to honor my dad and kind of tell his story from his perspective.
So it sounds like you're a very big camper type of guy yourself, then.
You know, a little from childhood. I remember camping from childhood. Nowadays, you know, my wife and I and our daughter, we live in the city, so it's not quite as a mainstay as it was when I was a kid. But I definitely have very fond memories from being a kid and camping with my dad specifically.
Hey, so tell me, back to the dream. What kind of creatures were chasing you from tent to tent? Obviously, it's not the same that's the one that's portrayed in the movie.
Right. Yeah. I remember specifically there were like these kind of big horse-like they galloped like horses, and they were, you know, hairy, and it was, but they walked on all fours, and it was really vivid. I couldn't see their faces, but I could see their eyes, and they had these big yellow eyes, and so I just remember like yellow eyes, and so it needed to have yellow eyes, and so you get a brief glimpse of it in the movie of its eye. And we actually ordered special contacts for that, to create that kind of that yellow eye. Um, so yeah, they were these big galloping, almost gorilla slash horse type creatures. So, which is, you know, probably the two creatures you would want mixed the least out of the animal kingdom. So yeah.
So for the movie, was there an initial thought of ever showing the creature, or did you just want to leave it mysteriously?
You know, it initially, yeah, I was like, oh, we're gonna do creatures, we're gonna do practical effects, we're gonna do the whole nine. And then I think probably about midway through pre-production, you know, we were doing tests and stuff with different effects, and and I just, everything that I saw, I'm like, this isn't good enough, or this doesn't look exactly what I'm thinking. And I just remember kind of going back to this idea, and I've heard other directors say it, which was, the imagination of the viewer is going to conjure up something far more terrifying in their head than anything you could ever make, with the exceptions being probably Ridley Scott's Alien, or the classic like Jaws, or stuff like that. But we didn't have a budget like Ridley Scott or Steven Spielberg, so I just knew anything that I could create is not going to scare you about as much as what you can imagine in your head. So we did shoot some scenes just to kind of feel it and imagine what it could be like. But ultimately, I knew pretty early on, like, we're probably not going to show a lot of this creature. And a lot of that was shot intentionally with that idea in mind.
So, because of the fact that you shot it this direction, does that give you increased pressure to get the script right? Because that basically means now you're just relying on the character dialogue and the story direction.
Yeah, definitely the pressure's there. I mean, I think pressure's there with any movie, but in something this kind of, it's kind of like, I always equated it to taking the viewer on this trip through the woods, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of these woods, there's just this giant cliff that drops off, and it's jarring, or it takes you away from a little bit of what we've been experiencing over the last hour, and so I really looked at that from a metaphor standpoint of, I know I'm going to be taking the audience off this cliff, and it really needs to, the biggest thing is with twists and turns in certain movies, I feel like sometimes, they earn those twists and turns, and sometimes it's just like, that old kind of thing that, old script teachers would teach me, which is like, the whole, I woke up and it was just a dream. They said, never do that. Do not do that. And so, you just have to be very careful with twists and turns. It has to feel earned. And I think I really was careful about trying to set that twist up in a way that was realistic, but also the audience felt like, okay, now that I'm kind of feeling what I felt the first half of the movie, this makes sense for me. At least I'm hoping that was achieved. And I know, it's every audience member is going to experience the movie differently, but that was kind of the idea, is that we at least earned it. And so, yeah, there was a lot of focus on dialogue and just making sure that breadcrumbs were laid throughout all of that dialogue. Yeah.
Was the twist the original ending thought? Because usually when people come up with these type of movies, they have like all these different type of endings. But was that twist the only idea that you came up with, and that's the ending you did definitely want?
Initially, there wasn't going to be as big of a twist. Actually, Tim Kaiser, who's the lead actor, he was on it from the beginning. And I knew I wanted him in the movie and playing the character David. So I wrote the script with him in mind. We've been friends for a while now. And so I just remember kind of talking to him about the script, and the initial ending was basically not that big of a twist. There was definitely a twist, but it wasn't. I'm trying to speak on it without spoiling a whole lot, but basically, the twist existed, but and it was the same twist, but we still kind of
kept to
that original concept.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then Tim was reading through it, and he goes, what if we went this direction with it? And I was like, absolutely not. I am not going to do that. That's crazy. And then I was like, you know what? I'm willing to give anything a shot. Let me just see if I can write this. And then I couldn't stop writing. And then I gave it to Tim, and he was like, Kyle, I really think this is it. And I gave it to a few more people that I trusted, and they were like, this is risky, but if you really feel good about this, then I think you should do it. And ultimately, obviously, I did.
That's amazing. I don't know too many screenwriters or directors that would actually take major inputs like that from talent. Uh,
Yeah, well,
and you did.
I mean, I think Tim is a different situation with me. Tim and I have been friends for years, and I actually made my first award-winning short film with Tim. So I hadn't won any awards or anything like that prior to working with Tim. He's kind of my good luck charm in a lot of ways, and he's just so wise, and he really knows. I mean, he's lived life. He knows a lot of things, and he's seen a lot of movies and shows and whatnot. And so, I kind of understand, like, not letting too many people come into your vision, but there was always an open door to him because he was playing this main character, and I wanted him to really, I think sometimes when you kind of keep those doors closed on talent, creatively, I think sometimes you could really miss out on something that could be really awesome. And so I've always tried to operate in that way, but with Tim, it's a completely different. It's the door is always open for him to suggest something and then try it. And I feel like if you just try it, it might not work. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it might work. So
Yeah, you use Tim in every single scene of this movie, if I recall. So
just about.
yeah, that's quite an accomplishment and quite a feat by itself. Did you film most of the movies first before you go back to his younger self, or did you basically film his younger self and then told him to grow a beard and and so on?
Yeah, no, we did most of the movie with the beard, and then we went back and did the younger self. And he actually, he like shaved after he shaved his beard, he put a little dye in his hair, and we actually recorded on a different camera, kind of a camcorder, if you will, so that way it kind of had that lesser quality. It helped with kind of masking, his age. But I mean, I'll tell you what, when Tim shaves his beard off, he looks like he's like in his 40s. Like, he looks so young. And that beard really just instantly, boom, ages him up. And I always knew I wanted the beard with Tim for the primary part of the film. But yeah, he put some dye in his hair. We kind of had some retro clothing fitted for him, and had a little bit of stuffing in his belly, so that way, we wanted him to be very skinny when he was doing that. And Lulu, she had just done a bodybuilding competition, and so she was already down to a very small weight, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know if this is gonna," and I'm like, "No, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want." So yeah, the both of them, they were willing to do pretty much anything that I would put them through.
So I understand why Tim was perfect for the role, and he was quite good. Could you
Mhm.
talk about Lulu herself? How you discovered her and brought her into the project?
Yeah, absolutely. Lulu's great. I worked with Lulu back in 2015. So I was telling you about that award-winning short. Well, actually, Lulu starred opposite Tim in that too.
Oh, okay.
So we basically hired her. We had a friend who knew, really good talent, and actually, that movie, it's called The Eulogy. That was actually based on my wife's kind of her story, and so Lulu actually played my wife, and my wife and Lulu do not look the same whatsoever. But I just remember seeing her perform, and I was like, she is so good at just bringing out emotion and bringing out, kind of a realness to a character. And so I just remember thinking, like, man, if I ever do a feature film, I'm gonna use Tim and Lulu, because I really loved working with them. The collaboration between the two of them was really fun, and of course the tent came up, and originally, with the tent, it was actually going to be myself. I was going to play Lulu's character, and it was going to be a man. And then my wife and I were talking, and she was like, what if you made it a woman? And I was like, that's really interesting. And then what if, you make it, and I just remember thinking, oh man, Lulu. And, obviously with some twists and turns that I don't want to talk about, but it just really provided a really, it kind of buries the twist a little bit further by putting Lulu in the role that she's in. And I just loved it. I mean, and bringing her on immediately, she was like, I'm game, let's do it. And working with her is just the best. She's so great.
I do believe that, because that you threw some screwballs and curveballs into that mix. That was an excellent move. The setting itself, was that out in the wilderness in where was it, Michigan or something like that?
Yeah, so we filmed in Ray Township, and it was out in the wilderness. So we had 2 sets, basically. We had one set that all the external shots of the tent, that was on location in Ray, and that was like in the middle of nowhere. We had to take a dirt road out to this location and basically get generators for all the power. There was nothing around us. And actually, I was telling somebody that when at the end of the night, when we turned off all the lights and we're in the woods and have to walk back to our cars and whatnot, it was spooky. Like, it was like we're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, granted, we're all together, so it's not as spooky, but it was definitely like, it was pitch black when we shut those lights off. And then all the interior shots of the tent were actually on in a studio. So that way we could control the weather, we could control noises, and I really give props to Robert Skates. He was our cinematographer. I remember saying to him, no, we're going to do all the interior shots on a stage, and then we're going to do all the exterior shots. And I just really hope it looks, like they're not, on a stage here and then they're in the wilderness over here. And he was like, I got it handled. And he did. I mean, that was, to me, one of the most flawless parts of the film, is them going inside and out the tent and it never feeling like one's on a stage and one's not. So yeah, he killed it. He really did.
That thought never crossed my mind, but for the wilderness one, I didn't think that you truly wanted to exert that much effort to go truly out in the middle of nowhere. You could have just found some countryside farm and just film on the edge, but you didn't do that.
No, and we looked at tons of places. I put Nancy Lynette Parker, she's our executive producer, and she wore tons of hats, and she found all of our locations and got all the paperwork and everything with those. And she took me to about 6 or 7 different locations, and I had a really specific image in my head, and I wanted him to be surrounded by trees, but also have like one little opening. And we found the spot, and then, there was a lot of weeds and whatnot, small trees. And so our entire crew went out there and kind of flattened everything out, made sure that we didn't disrupt any wildlife or anything like that, but we just flattened it so that way it looked like it was a lived-in area. And then our prop designers all just were able to litter the entire campground and make it really feel lived in. So they were phenomenal. They're so good.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't want to dive right into the nitty gritty things of the plot, like the apocalypse and all this kind of stuff, because I personally think that the viewers will appreciate the movie more if we just let them watch the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like you had a great experience. I know it's a silly question to ask during a pandemic, but as creative people, we're always working. What are you working on? Some projects now?
Yeah, I am actually. So I work for a nonprofit. That's kind of my day job, and I kind of juggle between the two, filmmaking and doing that. But at the nonprofit, I do a lot of video production, and actually, we just put on this live event the other night because we can't have any events, and so we had to do this virtual type event. And it was quite the production for the entire month of basically end of June to now. I was just making video after video after video, because that's what I do for the nonprofit. I do video production, and so it is that in itself felt like I was making a little movie. And so right now you're kind of catching me like sitting back and relaxing, and just kind of taking a break for a second. And then actually in the next week or two, I'm going to continue writing. I'm working on a script for my next feature film, and actually Tim will be in that as well. We're doing that together. So hopefully that will come out within the next couple years, and we'll be able to have a similar conversation.
Excellent. That sounds terrific. And before I let you go, Tim seems to be your favorite go-to actor. Why is that?
I think, Tim provides an opportunity to really dive into kind of wizened characters, I think. And, for me, I don't, there are movies out there with older male protagonists, but there's not as many as I'd like to see. And I really think, like, Tim is the type of actor who can really kind of stand in the middle of a movie, and then you can litter him with so many great supporting characters that bounce off of him. The first performance that I remember seeing Tim in, he played this really kind of oily bad guy. And he showed me the trailer for it, and I'm watching this trailer, and I'm talking to this man, and it's not the same person. And I'm like, this guy must be really good if he can play this despicable of a character, but I'm talking to basically a saint here. Tim is, I just think he's so talented, and I think that he is probably one of the most dedicated actors I've ever worked with, and I've worked with a few, and you can usually get good actors, but the dedication aspect, they show up to set and that's kind of it. Or you get somebody who's extremely dedicated, but they're not maybe that great of an actor. And so, kind of balancing between the two. And Tim, I really do feel like he's equal parts dedicated and talented. And so, to me, there's really no other option. But I always love bringing more people into the stable and getting new opportunities, and I'm sure that will happen for sure.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to check out any of your future work once we get back rolling again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Hey, not a problem. Hey, thank you for conversing with me about the tent, and we could now see it everywhere. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.